Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Sunday School Bonanza, brought to you by those of us at thisweekinmormon.com. This is your 10-minute Gospel Doctrine Preparatory podcast. This week we're on Lesson 25, called They Taught with Power and Authority of God. We're in Alma 17 through 22, really. Some good stuff. Before we get to it, I'd like to welcome once again, hosting with us this week, Cameron Poulter. Nice to have you here.
Good to be back.
For those of you who don't know, Poulter is my old mission buddy.
Hello,
Not just
sir.
Buddy, companion. I was his senior companion.
That is true.
I was the zone leader, and he was my lowly little acolyte.
I attempted to kill you.
My lackey. He did.
But I failed.
Yeah, I survived.
Right.
Oh, you meant kill me that you wanted to be around until I went home. For the mission?
Right.
Or real
Yeah,
killing?
yeah. No, can't remember having tried to kill you for real.
Oh, you just wanted to be there for my last transfer.
Yeah, it would have been nice.
Yeah, fun time. Well, folks, great stuff like we said here today. Alma 17. We are in just missionary, just like hardcore mode here with this lesson this week. There's so much good stuff, and many of you know what happens in Alma 17. First, I would like to read a little thing from Elder Carlos E. Ace. So he says, quote, so your teacher might write the words to know, to feel, and to do. So here's the quote. Not too long ago, I heard the testimony of a new convert, a young man obviously touched by the Spirit. Among other things, he indicated that it was his great desire to share the restored gospel with his family and friends. With tears in his eyes and a quiver in his voice, he said, I want them to know what I know. I want them to feel what I feel. I want them to do what I have done. There is a missionary spirit, a spirit which urges us to live outside ourselves and be concerned for the welfare of others. And anyone who has ever served an honorable mission, assisted in the conversion of a friend, supported a son or daughter in the mission field, or enjoyed close associations with missionaries will testify of its reality.
Definitely.
I definitely just want to back that up because it's like the essence of missionary work is just that, getting out of ourselves and concerning ourselves with the welfare of others. That means, of course, testifying of the truthfulness of the gospel, but it means a great many other things, because part of being a missionary is to be an example of true Christ-like behavior and being concerned for others and stuff like that. So,
and we do this every day in our lives, right? I mean, the social platforms of the day are totally built around sharing, because when something is wonderful, we want to share it, and that's what it's all about.
I concur.
Yeah.
Anyways, I love it. And that's true. I mean, I think many of us struggle. We want to get to that point where we feel that when we experience so much joy from our testimonies that we don't feel like it's an obligation to share it. We feel a true compulsion to really like do it because we want other people to know about it.
Right.
So real quick, let's get into some meat right here. So it's starting in Alma 17. Of course, the sons of Mosiah and their pal Alma split ways a number of years ago to go out and preach. And then right here, as it turns out, as they're just traveling around, they'll just bump into each other out in the wilderness somewhere. They've been apart for 14 years, which is just fascinating to me.
Right.
Can you imagine the joy you would feel, especially with all that they have been through, is going from where they started to where they are now, and just to see each other. They probably didn't know when and where they would see one another again. And yet there they are. A
little bit of a lack of a postal system.
Yeah,
you know, and any sort of modern electronics.
And so it's just, I love it. And of course, we talk about what made them effective teachers. And the key points here in Alma 17 are to study and to fast and to pray. And what can make us a more effective teacher than that? I can't think of anything. There's perfect principles there that we can't teach what we don't know, which we've said many times, but we have to study. We have to study. Too often I've seen these people who get up and give sacrament meeting talks and just say, well, I didn't really prepare anything, but I'm hoping the Spirit's going to guide me. And I'm like, it's probably not, because you didn't put in the time to have the Spirit guide you.
Right.
I mean, there have been many times I've given lessons or talks and I prepared in advance, and then I felt the Spirit tell me to do something differently.
Right.
But I had to put in that other effort, and it doesn't matter that I didn't talk about what I prepared. It's the fact that I was in a situation to receive that.
I mean, it's all about making the sacrifice in order to be able to then give more. And it's interesting that when we make sacrifices for the gospel, we end up having more abundant knowledge or spirit or whatever you want to say to be able to share with others. And so what sacrifices did they make? Well, they did those very things. Yeah.
And so then the sons of Mosiah go on to preach some more. They've definitely endured many, many hardships. Some had seen much greater success than others. Obviously, there have been the few who just had nothing happen. And then, of course, we have these starting, of course, with Ammon here. We'll see some crazy conversion stories. And so that's the gist of it. Sets it up here, and then we go on to Alma gets to meet a fine man named King Lamoni.
Yes, sir. So here we are, and Ammon's going to... Now we get to recount Ammon's story, right? And Ammon goes ahead and serves, teaches the king Lamoni And they ask some really good questions in this section. For example, perhaps one of the first things I want to talk about is that when Ammon shows up, so often I think young missionaries go out and they just think, okay, now I'm a servant of the Lord. I've got power. I am ready to go tell these people what is up, and I'm going to convert them. And it's come from their hearts, right? But
Yes.
but perhaps what they forget is the serving part. They just think that people need to accept the message,
Right.
Which is, I mean, I'm not trying to call anybody out on that. I'm just saying that's kind of it. That's how I felt as a young missionary.
Oh.
I've got a message. People need to listen to me. But the first thing that Ammon does is says, hey, I want to be your servant. He doesn't show up and say, I've got the truth, because he knew that was not going to be an effective mode of reaching Lamoni and his people. So he says, I want to be your servant. No, I'm not going to marry one of their daughters. Who knows? Maybe they were not attractive. We don't know.
We don't know.
But that's totally beside the point. He serves.
And of course, the classic story for people who don't know, it's simply that he serves, he guards the flocks and this and that, and then eventually some naughty, pesky Lamanites or whatever they're doing keep stealing the flocks.
Right.
Ammon gets in there with the sling in his business and starts taking them out, basically. And then he comes to Lamoni after going out and brings him a basket full of arms, basically, and says, hey, look what I did.
Look what I did.
And Lamoni is very impressed by this, as kind of gory as that is. But
right.
Yeah.
Ammon's heart became swollen with joy. Now, why did it do that? It could be because he really liked shooting slingshots, and so he saw it as a good time to practice. But more likely, it's because he saw an opportunity to let the power of the Lord demonstrate itself. So Ammon brings the arms, brings them to the king, and the king sits there, I think it says, for the space of an hour. A little awkward. All right, I'll just keep standing here until you decide to talk to me. And finally, the king says, the king asks him, are you God? Impersonated? No, but I know that guy. And so he gets his teaching opportunity after the initial service and after showing forth the Lord's power. So then we know that King Lamoni gets struck unconscious, which I suppose isn't much of a surprise for Ammon since he's seen this happen before. With his buddy Alma.
Fair point.
And then, and so he's like, all right, well, he's going to get taken care of while he's unconscious there. And
they think he's dead, and I remember there's all the scriptures of he doth not stink, so they don't know what's going on because he's not rotting or anything like a corpse. But
right. Who knows if he was breathing? Maybe they could check that. I'm not sure.
Right.
But he ends up coming back to himself, and the first thing that he does is says, I have been born again, and I have a wonderful message for you, and he teaches it to his wife and his servants. So we come back to the theme of sharing. When you really feel it in your heart, you want to share that with other people. So he shares it with them, then everybody starts fainting. It's a little bit of a fainting party.
I always forget. Is this Alma in this passage when there's the one girl who doesn't faint because she was converted at some random point by her grandfather? You know what I'm talking about?
Right. Yeah.
This is
Abish.
Right.
So everybody's fainting, and I can't remember if that's right here in what I assume to be the king's bedroom, or if this is actually a little bit later
or something. Yeah.
Right, in his court. So now everybody's starting to faint. And there's one guy that's like, this evil Nephite has come, and he's wreaking havoc among my king and everything. So he walks up, raises his sword, and dies.
Yeah.
So I guess don't do that to prophets of the Lord. But anyway, then Abish goes out and says, hey, actually, my father has had this wonderful experience. I know what's going on with these people because her father was visited by an angel or grandfather or something like that. But I think that that's also significant because sometimes as members of the church, perhaps we forget that the Lord still loves all of his children, and the Lord lets a lot of his children have wonderful experiences, whether or not they're members of the church. Does he want them to be members of the church? Yeah, I think so. But
of course, but agency,
right,
plays into it.
And people still have wonderful experiences that later come back and say, oh, now this ties in and strengthens my testimony of the gospel. When they find it.
It's true. And so I love this example of everything that Ammon was able to do. And he saw such great success through it. Now, of course, this does not mean that his own righteousness made him how I explain it. Basically, we're going into the world of Aaron, where Aaron is equally righteous, but while Ammon has had great success, Aaron is in prison.
Gets thrown in prison
for the same thing. And so during this time, Lamoni visits with his father, basically, and tells him what's going on. His father's like, because his father's a greater king. Lamoni's a king, but his father's like the head king, which is kind of confusing. But a governor, president sort of situation. Right. And, the great thing is Lamoni demonstrates great faithfulness, because Lamoni's father at first is not going to hear it. He wants to have Ammon taken away. And he's like, no, that's not happening. And actually, we are going to go and get his brother out of prison, and you're not going to do anything about it. Right. And that's how it's going to be. So they go in Alma 21, and they get Aaron, of course, finally out of prison. And then Aaron, great lesson here, Aaron goes straight back to work. Right. He doesn't go, dude, that sucked. I need a breather. I need some R&R.
I've been in prison. I have no clothes right now. This is miserable.
He goes and gets to it. And then, which I think is great, because like we say, we that teaches us something. We have to go forth. Life isn't going to be easy, and there's great times when we're able to recuperate, but absolutely, also sometimes we have to persevere even when it's really hard. Right. And I learned a lot from Aaron in that sense. So Aaron is led by the Spirit to the house of King Lamoni's father. I just love to picture this, like, where shall I go? Oh, perhaps a king I shall seek.
Perfect. Very good. Jumping back just for a second, I think it's a significant, one of the questions about, or one of the amazing things about Ammon, a couple of his great characteristics, is the reason that King Lamoni was so impressed by him, or King Lamoni's father, was so impressed, was the love that he could see that Ammon had for his son Lamoni, and that it was a mutual relationship there. And another thing about Ammon is that he's not like, hey, you know what? I just did this kingdom. I'm gonna do this one as well. Right. So he's just not. There's no self-aggrandizement going on here, and he just goes back to work with Lamoni's people, and Aaron gets this opportunity.
Aaron takes over, and Aaron teaches in a very similar fashion, and Lamoni's father has a very similar experience. And I love some of the things that Lamoni's father says that he was willing to do to really understand this. And he says he'll forsake his kingdom. He says, he'll repent of all his sins, bow down before God, call on his name, all this stuff. But I love that he says that he will give up all that he possesses to receive this great joy that he's seen his son has received. Right. Couldn't you? I can't even imagine that. I'm grateful for the testimony I've received, but I don't think I've ever been in a place where I felt the exact sentiment of, like, I'm willing to give up everything that I have just so I can understand and feel what someone has. But how great would that be if that's our real mindset? Because oftentimes we have doubts about things. We want to develop stronger testimonies. We want to know the truth. Right. But we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to give up or put in order to receive that? Because too often we think that it's just a free pass because Heavenly Father loves us and stuff, and it'll just be like, I'll give this to you, sure. But it requires work, and Lamoni's father was quickly learning that and learning the value of it.
Definitely requires work. Although we don't want to get sidetracked and think, well, okay, maybe if I give up my house or whatever. As President Oak said in his famous dating versus hanging out talk back in 2005, he's like, don't eat the seed corn. So there's definitely some listening to the Spirit that needs to go on, and what do I sacrifice and what do I use to the furthering of my family or my whatever.
Yeah, and there's a great quote here in the lesson that you might see from President Ezra Taft Benson. And it says, quote, "Each of us must surrender our sins if we are to really know Christ, for we do not know him until we become like him. There are some, like this king, who must pray until they too have a wicked spirit rooted from them so they can find the same joy," unquote. And I love that. We've seen that with that. We saw that with Enos, great example in the book of Enos of someone who spent all that time praying to learn these things. Yeah. And Lamoni's father, in the same sense, is overcome by the Spirit, struck as if he were dead, basically, and is risen. And this sets off this incredible story in motion of this little breakaway sort of group of Lamanites who are converted to the gospel. And, of course, as we know, they will become, they will merge, they'll become anti-Nephi Lehis, all that stuff. And it's kind of funny when we think this early on, this is going to carry throughout all of the book of Alma.
Right, and these are going to be the parents, essentially, of the sons of Helaman. Yeah. And these are some really faithful people here. And they set a great precedent.
They really did, and the great precedent was possible because of just humble, selfless, loving missionary work. If the sons of Mosiah had not been in a place where they were worthy or spiritually prepared to do this, who knows what would have happened. Right? Absolutely. And so that's a terrific thing. Love this lesson. These are some great passages. Once again, of course, Alma 17 through 22. Read all of it. Come prepared. You'll be happy you did. Cameron.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here.
is my pleasure.
Poulter, I
sir.
love you a lot, buddy. Nice to meet
I
you.
love you, Jim.
And this has been lesson 25. They taught with power and authority of God. And this is, of course, Sunday School Bonanza, brought to you by This Week in Mormons. Find us at thisweekinmormons.com, facebook.com/thisweekinmormons, Twitter @TheRealTwim, and shoot us an email, contact@thisweekinmormons.com. And you can find this on YouTube.